Hey guys, so today we are starting the day 4 video. Today we're going to be talking about the nucleus, mitochondria, and cytoplasm. Okay? You probably already have a good idea of how each one of these things works, so I'm sure that a lot of this is just going to be revision. So the nucleus of a cell contains most of the cell's DNA, which stores information used to make proteins that determine a cell's growth, function, and reproduction. They are found in eukaryotic cells. So you guys remember bacteria, which are prokaryotic, do not contain a nucleus. But in eukaryotic cells, such as plants and animals, we have a nucleus which contains all of our DNA. This DNA is basically what controls the cell, because depending on what part of the DNA is activated, you're going to have different activities happening in the cell. This is because DNA codes for proteins. So if I want a specific activity to happen in the cell, I need to activate a certain part of the DNA, which will create a specific protein, which will go on to do a specific job. And then, when I don't want the cell to do that anymore, you close up that part of the DNA, and you can open up another part which codes for another protein, which will allow the cell to do something else. So depending on what part of the DNA is active, your cell is going to do different things. And all of this activity is controlled by inside of your nucleus. This is an extremely important job. The nucleus also helps protect your DNA, and it contains different proteins that are constantly checking the DNA, making sure it hasn't mutated, fixing any problems with it, because the DNA of the cell is an extremely important thing. If all of a sudden you got a specific mutation in your DNA, it could lead to your cell turning cancerous, or it can lead to your cell dying, right? So protecting your DNA is an extremely important job because it literally is the brain of the cell and tells your cell exactly what to do. All right, so when we look at the nucleus, we see that it is made up of a double membrane or envelope found all over your DNA. So inside is your DNA, and here, two different layers around all of this stuff, right? So in order to enter and exit the nucleus, you can only enter and exit through nuclear pores. Nuclear pores are teeny tiny little holes which allow materials to enter and exit the nucleus. Remember, whatever can enter and exit the nucleus is very specific because the nucleus is very important. Not just anything can go in and out through the nuclear pore, right? You have to have a purpose for being there, and you have to have a reason for leaving. DNA does not leave the nucleus, and certain things do not enter the nucleus. In the center of the nucleus, we have a structure called the nucleolus. The nucleolus is basically a big bundle of DNA, and in this location right here, you'll get ribosomes being made. We'll talk more about ribosomes later on, but just so you know, this is where ribosomes are made. Ribosomes are used to build proteins, which means that they have an extremely important job, and they need to be one of the first things made inside of the cell before the nucleus can start building other proteins. All right? So these are the three main structures of the nucleus. All right, now the second organelle that we're going to talk about today is the mitochondria. I'm sure you all know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Everybody knows this, right? So the main job of the mitochondria is to undergo cellular respiration, which basically means you give it sugar and it gives you ATP. So it breaks down sugar and other materials and uses it to form energy in the form of ATP. ATP can be used by other parts of the cell to do their activity, to do anything that requires energy. This is why mitochondria is an extremely important part of the cell. This is also why cells that require more energy will contain more mitochondria, right? Every cell has one nucleus, but cells can have more than one mitochondria. So even when you look here, you can see that there are two of them, right? So if you are talking about your muscle cells, which are constantly moving and constantly need energy, they will have a lot more mitochondria than cells that are inactive or slow or don't need as much energy. Because mitochondria are so important, they are found in both plants and animals because both plants and animals need to be able to make ATP. All right? So, if you look at the mitochondria, as well as many other organelles inside of the cell and other parts of the body, you'll see lots and lots of folds. These folds are extremely important because they help to increase the surface area. Now, I'm sure you're wondering what that means. Basically, it means if you have a piece of paper and it's flat, it takes up a large area. I can't put that piece of paper in my pocket. I can't put it anywhere because it's flat and it needs to actually have room to exist in. But if I took a piece of paper and I crumpled it up into a teeny tiny little ball, all of those folds would be in there. If I open up the paper is still the same size, but it takes up less room because it's in a smaller, more compact area. And this is a very important thing that cells and other living things, even in the human body, do. If you take something and you crumple it up and put all of these little folds, you will get a large structure that is compacted into a small area. This is a huge advantage for cells. They want to be able to do a lot of work in a very small area. So anytime you see that you have something that is highly folded because it helps to increase the surface area, that just means I'm able to do a lot of work in a very small area, okay? So, as we said before, cells which require more energy contain more mitochondria. And now, specifically in plant cells have a mitochondria. They also contain a chloroplast. And you guys remember, we learned about chloroplasts when we talked about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process where you take energy from sunlight and convert it into chemical energy, such as sugars, which can be stored inside of the plant, right? Mitochondria are found mainly in plant cells, not in animal cells, and they give the plant that greenish color because of the chlorophyll pigment found inside of them. All right? So chloroplasts are also composed of highly folded up membranes called thylakoids. So all of this also ensures that you can do a lot more work in a smaller space. So you have a high surface area and a small space, small volume. All right? Now, chloroplasts do not only make energy for the cell by converting sunlight into sugar, they can also be used as a place where you can store different starches and lipids, right? So they're multi-purpose. They can do more than one thing. All right, and something that is very important about chloroplasts and mitochondria is they're believed to have entered into eukaryotic cells through a process called endosymbiosis. Endosymbiosis basically means that a specific organism entered a cell, and basically, after it entered the cell, this relationship was a huge advantage for the organism and the cell that they decided to just stay together. So, they believed that the chloroplast and the mitochondria were originally their own prokaryotic cells. They existed on their own, they swam around, they did their own thing, and it just so happened that they found a larger cell which took them in, and it was an advantageous relationship, so they stayed together forever, right? So they would provide a lot of different things for this cell, and this cell would provide different things for them. Now, the reason scientists believe that this is true is because if you look inside of a chloroplast or a mitochondria, you'll find that they have their own DNA, which is separate from our DNA. They reproduce in different ways, obviously asexually, and they have their own ribosomes, which means that they can create their own proteins within themselves, right? So this is the main idea because they believed, as we said earlier on in the lesson, for you to be a cell, you need to have a cell membrane, cytoplasm, ribosomes, and DNA. And chloroplast and mitochondria contain all four of these things. This is why scientists believe that they had originally been free-floating organisms that existed on their own, and they just happened to fall into one cell. The relationship was a huge advantage for all of them, so they stayed together forever. And that's the idea of how organelles originated inside of cells. Endosymbiosis. All right, guys, so now you can go ahead and work on your quiz. Good luck.